All right, this is going to introduce you to the concept drawing for Tokyo Monster. Now, under the camera lens right now, you see a final drawing for Tokyo Monster, fully colored and fully shaded. You have two victims in the foreground, three buildings in the middle ground, and up near the top, you have one monster. Now, this monster doesn't look very threatening, except for the fact that it's very large. So your monster doesn't really have to be that scary. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to have a monster in your picture, but we'll talk more about that later. Let's get started. So in Tokyo Monster, as I mentioned, you have to have certain elements. You have to have your victims, too. You have to have your buildings, and you have to have your monster. Here's a line drawing, a concept drawing that I did last year. And I bet you recognize the monster, which really isn't a monster, but it's still frightening, and that would be the COVID virus here. And not only do I have one COVID virus looking pretty cute, but I've got a couple more poking their heads in around the buildings there. Down below, it looks like he's gasping for breath, and this guy has his hands thrown up in the air like he's giving up. Now remember, you're part of this crowd down here. You, the viewer, are part of this crowd looking from below up above, seeing the monster and the buildings high in the air, okay? So your viewpoint is down below, and you're part of this crowd, part of this group. Therefore, because they're close to you, their faces are big, and you may not see their whole bodies. You draw as you imagine it, turning your head over your shoulder, you see their heads and their shoulders too, but very little else. Behind them we have the city, and finally the monsters up above. Now, I may have mentioned that you don't have to really do a monster. Here's a cupcake, not really a monster. Here's a meteor, not really a monster. Here's grape and strawberry jelly coming down on the building, smothering them, not really a monster. A UFO, a monster might come out of the UFO, but the UFO itself is not a monster. And if you do a monster, you don't have to draw the whole animal. Tuck most of it, hide most of it, if you want to, behind some of the buildings, okay? Now here is a good example of me not using a monster. A monster or any threat to the city like flaming marshmallows will do. And again, we have our two victims, at least three buildings, and our threat to the city, in this case, flaming marshmallows, okay? Now I've gone ahead and started this concept drawing. I want you to notice that I use my basic marks. I use my ovals, I use my straight lines, and I also have gone in here and begun to draw out in greater detail the monster himself. He looks like a giant hot dog with very sharp teeth. Because I've started to use Sharpie marker, I think I'll continue to do that. But before I do that, let me go ahead and see if I can add a little more detail. Remember on our pile of pumpkins how we sometimes use contour lines? Those contour lines might come in handy again right now, and I'll show you why. If this curving contour showed me the middle of this victim's face, I could put a nose there, an eyeball there, nice and wide, a slightly bigger one here, nice and wide. Let's go ahead and make those eyeballs a little more noticeable. Okay, he's looking up in the air, his brows are worried, his mouth is kind of showing a level of concern. Oh, mouth is open right now. Look, his lips are open. There's his tongue. He could almost be screaming out loud. I'm going to go ahead and shape the cheek a little differently. Come in, narrow in on the head. There's a little hair right there. Put in a lip. Darken that nose. Maybe make it a little bit smaller. Let's go ahead and give him a chin, a collar there where his shirt meets his neck, shoulders, and there you go. There's my first victim right there. Put a little shine on his nose. Now you know you don't have to add any shading to any of your concept pieces, but occasionally if you want to do a little shading or a little color, you can, okay? Let me go ahead and put a little cheek right over there on that side. Make sure his hair is darkened on that side, okay? Now again, these contour lines, what if I wanted to make this victim running straight at me? So here are his big wide eyes coming straight at me, dead center, right down the middle, and there's his mouth. And again, I'll give him a tongue. And I think I'll indicate that he's very surprised with an exclamation mark there. And I'm going to go ahead, give him ears, You see I've changed the dimensions or the size of his face just a little bit. Give him a neck, give him a collar, and I'm done with that fellow. Okay? So the victims really weren't that hard. If you wanted to put another victim in here, you could, but you wouldn't have to. I think I'm going to leave that out. Remember that as you move forward through your steps, you can always make changes that improve your work. I can go ahead now and start to darken some of my lines. You never have to do your concepts in ink. Never, ever, ever. Pencil is just fine. But sometimes I like going over my lines in ink just because I find that yet another reason to go ahead and make changes that I believe will benefit the drawing. So let me figure out what else I might do to this to improve it. I think I'll go ahead and put some darkness in the eye there to really make that light shine. There's his nose. There are his very concerned brows. Like that. I don't think I'll darken that all the way in. And I say that, and then I darken it all the way in, don't I? Okay. It almost looks like he's looking down. I wonder what he's looking at. This fellow, uh-oh, made a mistake there. Didn't get that line right. Making these a little bigger than I drawn them because the marker has such a fat tip. There's that exclamation mark. The neck, the collar, a little shine on his nose right there. Let's go ahead and finish off this building. Your buildings don't have to be very complicated at all, nor do they have to have much detail on them at all. They do, however, need to have a sense of light and shadow so we understand them as three-dimensional objects in space. I could add some contour lines like this on that side, or on this side I might go ahead and do some upside down L's to kind of suggest windows. I see just a portion of the window frame there. Maybe here I'll just do a few distant dots running up and down, but in fact I don't need to do much. There's the rest of that hot dog right there. I don't think I need any more than that. And I am finished with my concept drawing, ready to start my final. Remember that finals have to be fully colored and fully shaded, but this certainly would get me my 30, maybe even my 40 points. Remember, 2 victims in the foreground, at least 3 buildings in the middle ground, and some kind of monster, your decision, your threat to the city, whatever it happens to be, there in the background. Now, you try.